Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. My name's Fred. I'm the beer-evangelist, and I'm here with my good friend Scott Graham, who is the Executive Director for the Michigan Brewers Guild. Scott, welcome to the Great Beer State.
Thanks, Fred. Happy to be here as usual, and had a great time listening to the interview. And again, even though I know the story pretty well, there are good tidbits in there that I did not know.
Yeah, this is an interesting episode because we're going to be talking with Alec Mull, who we recorded in the fall of 2018 from the Zeppelin Lounge of the Knickerbocker at New Holland Brewing in Grand Rapids. And I spent some years working with Alec. You spent a lot of years working with Alec. So we both have a lot of work history with Alec, and it was a really fun interview to participate in and maybe even more so to listen back to. So we have that coming up. And I think before that, we'll kind of cover the updates, which are going to be a little different for a couple episodes. In that we're recording in advance to provide for some vacation time and a little break. So our updates are sort of the consistent theme that we've been updating, which is enjoy the beautiful Michigan fall, support your breweries, your local breweries, your Michigan Brewers Guild member breweries, and be kind out there during this challenging pandemic shifted hospitality industry. But other than that, we're going to be real brief, and we're going to jump right into a revised Brewers Dozen. You got anything you want to season that with, Scott?
No, I just really think that those are timely comments. Even though we've been repeating them, I continue to get frustrating stories from people working at breweries who are just trying to do their best. And a good dose of patience makes the beer taste better. Trust me.
There you go. I like it. And as mentioned before, we've been through the cycle of member breweries with the Brewers Dozen. So now we're choosing geographically, and you've selected this group of breweries sort of in homage and in support of the Grand Rapids brewing community, which features our guest, Alec. So why don't you kick us off?
Well, as you mentioned, because the interview featured is Alec Mull, who is with Founders Brewing Company. We're starting off with Founders Brewing Company and are going to work through a little radius of breweries that are near Founders in Grand Rapids.
All right. Next up, we got Grand Rapids Brewing Company, which is right downtown. It's had a couple of lives, actually three probably. One really historic, and then another long-term run on 28th Street, and now its current incarnation there in downtown Grand Rapids Brewing Company.
Yeah, its previous life, again, was one of the very early, maybe number 2 or number 3 licensed brew pubs in the state. So it was a good run, and it's a great new place downtown. Not too far from Grand Rapids Brewing Company, downtown is Bob's Brewery. Of course, that is the microbrewery brew pub that's inside the Bob. For those who don't know, the Bob is affectionately named because it's a big old building, but there are multiple concepts of restaurants and bars in that space. And the Bob's been there for quite some time too. And of course, our friend John Svoboda is the brewer there, and he goes back to Grand Rapids Brewing Company on 28th Street. So we'll try not to talk in circles.
It gets tricky. Next up is Fountain Hill Brewery in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, so Fountain Hill, of course, is the brewery at Grand Rapids Community College, which is known for its culinary program, and they have a brewing program as well, and they're open on a limited basis. But that might be one that you haven't heard of. So Fountain Hill Brewery is a fun place. And then not too far away is New Holland Brewing Grand Rapids, also known as the Knickerbocker, but what a fabulous place. And basically in the downtown area, not right smack downtown, but not far from it, New Holland Grand Rapids.
Yeah, and of course that's my alma mater. I spent I think about 13 years on that team, so love the Knickerbocker, and it was the home base for several of our Rising Tide interviews. Next up, right across the street, we've got Jolly Pumpkin, Grand Rapids, one of several locations for them, and a great place. And I think probably less than 3 years old since they've been in that location.
Yeah, and speaking of places with multiple outlets, including those in Grand Rapids, is Atwater Brewery in GR. So again, it's an offshoot of Atwater with a really nice Grand Rapids location.
And that brings us to City Built Brewing Company. Their their sole location originating there in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, and again, the Mitten Brewing Company, which started in Grand Rapids, the Mitten Brewing Company Grand Rapids is their first operation, but they've grown to other communities as well.
And that brings us to Gray Line Brewing Company.
Yes, Gray Line, kind of on the corner of Northwest Grand Rapids, but still a Grand Rapids address. And a little bit on the other side of the city is Elk Brewing Grand Rapids. Again, a two operation, both in the greater Grand Rapids area. Two brewery operation, but we're talking about Elk Brewing on Wealthy Street.
Yeah, and heading over to the east side and east town, Grand Rapids, you got Brewery Vivant with Jason and Chris Spalding over there. And he was a co-founder of New Holland as well, of note. So this is a brewery that they started a little while later than that. Great spot.
And we will wrap things up with Harmony Hall, which is a second operation from Harmony, but we'll probably get back to the first Harmony with another with another visit to Grand Rapids and the Brewers Dozen. We certainly can't fit all the breweries in one, and this is the core cluster near downtown. So there you have it.
That's our Brewers Dozen for this episode, which means it's time to introduce our interview with Alec. Again, this was drawn from the archives of the Rising Tide project, so it's recorded in 2018. And a little listener warning: we're going to have to check the explicit box on the podcast syndication, because apparently me getting in proximity of Alex gets me excited and I start dropping F-bombs. So if you're sensitive to friendly expressions between old friends, you may need to prepare yourself or skip it. But you could really hear the enthusiasm. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, and I think that's one of my takeaways from listening to this is, man, Alec is just one of those people that has enthusiasm for days and a ton of great energy, and that's really been a hallmark of his career. It was great to hear his take on present day and the old days and what's important.
Yep, and his enthusiasm is infectious. And it's funny that you noted that. In listening to the interview, I was like, oh, geez, I wonder if we should do something. And I thought, you know what? If somebody takes issue with that and I have to talk to him, I'm just going to say, well, yeah, what can I say? That excitement, I think, got away with that with them, and it slipped out a couple of times. So,
yeah, it's pretty good natured.
So one of the other things that I thought was fun about the interview, of course, you'll hear Alec talk about how our careers bumped into each other a few times, and he actually left one out when we were. It was shortly after we had gotten the Big Buck and Gaylord open, and we were hiring a brewer. He applied for that job, and I was going to hire him. But then he came back and said, I think I'm going to be going on this extended trip X months in, or somehow he was coming clean saying, if my plans pan out, I'm going to go do this, and then I'd have to leave after a relatively short period of time. So I think I better just not take the job. So there's one kind of point of contact that wasn't even mentioned, and there were several. So it's certainly been a pleasure of mine to interact and work with Alec over the years. And of course, he is one of the key players in our work group that puts on the winter conference, and I really enjoy that and what he brings to the table. And he's just a wealth of knowledge and positive energy and a great part of our brewing community here in the Great Beer State.
Yeah, and he's a great example of the power of optimism. I mean, he's faced a lot of different obstacles, whether they be technical or whatever. But I mean, he's made it through a lot of challenging times, and you'd hardly know it because he's always finding the positive light in it, and how to not only work towards more positive, but how to be fueled by whatever they currently have. So I think he's always a great team member in that regard. And maybe that's why you and I really hook into it too, because we've both been team members with him. And so I think that's part of our relationship, is we understand how much he keeps things positive and moving forward. And so kudos to Alec for that. I hope you all enjoy it. I think we can leave the rest of the storytelling to Alec. He'll take you through decades of his life in and out of Michigan, brewing and Michigan beer community. So here's Alec Mull, Founders Brewing Company from 2018. Cheers.
Cheers to that.
Welcome, Alec.
Thanks, Fred.
Shit, we've known each other a long time.
I was just telling him the story about how we used to work together and we shared an office for a little while.
Lord.
That was
You call it an office. We shared an attic.
with what, maybe 8 other people, 10 other people?
I don't know.
Any given
Somewhere
day?
between 6 and 8. Oh, any given day,
Yeah.
gathered around desk.
Dozen, 15.
Oh, yeah.
I was just commenting that we'd be up there, in our production discussions and amongst other things. And you were over there trying to actually do business,
Yes.
have professional phone calls, and
Yes.
we were not as professional as I think you would have liked to have
brought
your
back
office
a little
mates.
nostalgic, like neck twist. I think I only had a couple tantrums though, so it's.
No, I mean, you were on the phone. We're over there, whatever, being idiots.
I remember one. Can you hold on a second? Thanks. Will you shut the fuck up? Okay, yeah.
We were like,
so
sorry, Fred, dude, take it easy, man.
what were we saying?
Oh, that was a good time, though. That was a good time. Too much fun, I think, is that period of time, though.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear kind of about your origin story in brewing. When did you first start making beer, and how did you come to do it professionally?
Well, I had an epiphany in 9th grade that yeast consumes sugar and produces alcohol and carbon dioxide in biology class.
Nice.
My science teacher taught me that. So I immediately went home.
That's how it happens.
I immediately went home and bought some apple cider and some Fleischmann's yeast.
Wow.
And I grabbed an airlock from my science lab and proceeded to ferment some cider in my closet in 9th grade. And then
Kudos to you. That's
moved
the
on
earliest
to
story we've heard so far.
9th grade. So then I moved on to, I'm going to call it grape juice, not wine, because it was fermented grape juice and probably a far stretch from wine, but I did that. And, that was pretty cool. I had no idea, of course, what I was doing, but it worked,
And you were consuming this as well?
Unfortunately, I was consuming that, yes.
And were you underground? Was this a known thing, or were you both having to manage the microbiology, the scientific, and manage the basically how to run a discrete undercover operation on your closet?
The distribution of it. Right?
Yeah.
It was
While being underground.
it was a source of pride, as I recall. When you get to go to a party.
But your parents weren't hip to what
My
was happening?
parents didn't know what was going on there. No, I didn't really talk about it to my folks, but my peers, I'll call them peers, the kids I went to school with, we drank it together. And
But in terms of troubleshooting any fermentation discoveries you were having,
no skill set at that point.
yeah, and you didn't have you weren't going to dad like,
No,
hey man.
I didn't have any resources there.
And so what were you taking away from it? Were you
I was amazed that I could just make alcohol. That nature would it was magical, right? So I think I got down that path. It was years before I realized and put two and two together that brewers make beer. I fell in love with beer basically in college, like a lot of kids do. You know, I drank beer before, but I really my epiphany towards beer happened in college, and I realized that there's people out there that got paid to make beer, and I decided I want to be one of those people.
Yeah.
I started homebrewing. We had Superior Grower Supply, which still exists, and they dabbled in the homebrewing as opposed to just the home growing.
Yeah.
But they had homebrewing equipment for some years. And then there was Beer Gear on Kalamazoo Avenue in Lansing.
Oh, yeah.
And so I go to Beer Gear. I loved it so much.
This is all happening in Lansing area.
This is all happening in Lansing area, yep. I worked at Beer Gear after they couldn't kick me out of the store, I think. And I worked at Beer Gear.
What year is that? What year did you graduate?
That was I graduated college in '95, so it was like '94 and '95 that I was working at Beer Gear. I probably started brewing really actively probably in 1991, like I think it was my sophomore year in college as a home brewer. Yeah, but it was one of those things like, you know, I don't know, you know me, I get kind of enthralled and
well, it had to come naturally too if you've got the fundamental building blocks from your undercover operation as a high schooler now saying, oh, so it's the same thing, but I'm gonna basically prepare the fermentation a little differently, and maybe I'm gonna monitor it a little different. I'm gonna channel it. I'm gonna channel it, but it's the same action that was happening.
The same magic.
In your first epiphany, you know.
It was the same magic, but different function and certainly different planning. So I actually was really kind of anal about the whole process.
And you're creating sugars versus just finding them.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, you're converting, I should say, not creating.
Yeah, and when I started, of course, you go the cans route, and it was very shortly thereafter that I realized I wanted to go the malt route and do the all grain recipe, so I did that. And then I just got wrapped up in it. It got to be more that the process, the brewing process was more about, well, I had more fun in that than the drinking the beer part. And I like to drink beer, as you're well aware.
So you're saying it's post-college, you're a homebrew supply, and you're saying, hey, I think I'm going to be one of these people that makes beer for a living.
Yeah.
What does that look like in
that's
96, right?
Right. Well, with 95, I worked there. I graduated in 95 and was fortunate enough to meet my future wife at the end of college. And honestly, I probably, in hindsight, could have gone back and changed my major. I was a philosophy major. I was, say, 3/4 of the way through my philosophy degree when I thought I wanted to make beer. So I didn't want to go back and take another couple of years of school. I finished school, got a philosophy degree, met my wife at the end of my college career, and then we moved out to Portland, Oregon, which is where I kind of segued. I'm not going to call Beer Gear a professional brewer, even though I did homebrew competitions there. I did demonstrations, that kind of fun stuff.
So adjacent, but short of being a pro brewer.
I'll say that. And then I moved out to Portland, Oregon, and basically the Mecca at the time. You know, maybe it still is, but it was where all these brewers were popping up, and there was a lot of folks from Michigan that had moved out to Portland, and it seemed like home. So my wife and I moved out there, and I got a job at a brewery called Peak Northwest Brewing Company. And they were in Milwaukee, Oregon, which is in the southwest corner of Portland. And it was great. It was a great opportunity. I was the only production employee. So I got to do everything, including set up the equipment, run all the brewing, all fermentation, all packaging, all kegging. And it was back in those days where you disassembled the keg, cleaned it, reassembled the keg. Yeah. It was a tremendous
I assume you're doing
experience.
that on behalf of an owner-operator who'd done it prior to hiring you.
Richard Steranko was his name. Yep, he was actually from New Jersey. Tremendous man. I always wonder where he's at now, because he was one of the hardest working people I've ever met.
Wow.
80-hour-a-week kind of guy. He owned the place with his wife, and was kind of in over his head just the market. Portland was the folks out there were already mature, and he was a startup, and it was challenging. It was challenging, but I had a tremendous opportunity. I got to do everything. I got to learn everything, and I learned that I was kind of mechanical. I could do this stuff and by myself, and had a lot of exposure to some other people. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go back a little bit. When I met Scott Graham, before I met my wife, I met Scott Graham.
Oh, really?
And we connected over homebrewing stuff, and kind of chatted homebrew and how much we loved it and loved beer. He worked at Bayside Beverage.
That's my question. Yeah.
I was dating a gal who lived up on Burt Lake, and spent the summer with her at her place. And her brother, Guy Cheney, actually lives here in East, and got me a job at Bayside Beverage.
Nice.
Sorting bottles. Yes. That
Not
was
the
a
full
job.
ones, I reckon.
Oh, they were empties. Well, they were only partially empty in some cases,
Even
full of
better.
all kinds of things. And then they had me delivering some beer. So we met a little bit before, and it was maybe shortly after my college when he started Big Buck. So we chatted a little bit. My wife and I kind of wanted to move out. I moved out to Oregon, and
So
a year
you saw
later,
Big Buck happen with your buddy Graham before you left town.
yes, sir.
Gotcha.
Left town, submitted resumes everywhere, got this job at Peak Northwest, great opportunity. And then we got a little homesick, Scott, I randomly met a guy who knew Scott Graham. I think his name was John Laverty, worked for Creveller, which was an equipment manufacturer in Canada. And he's like, hey, I know Scott Graham. I called Scott Graham. How's it going? He's like, hey, we're opening up another Big Buck. They were opening up Auburn Hills. So Claire and I talked about it, decided to take advantage, at least interview for the job. I interviewed for the job with Scott, and then moved back to Michigan to work for Big Buck. And that was in 1997.
Right.
1997.
So I imagine the scene here in Michigan looked a little different from when you left. So not only are you taking a second job in the brewing career, this career that you'd seen a few years earlier, but you're coming back and seeing the number of breweries, and I imagine the places of those breweries and just the whole scene
There was very few of them, right?
had to look a little different. And
There was just a handful, I think, at the time. And I was, naive and really didn't have a lot of experience at. I did have a great experience, like I said, working at Peak Northwest, but I hadn't really seen the world yet. I hadn't met a lot of brewers, and a handful here and there. And I hadn't really capitalized on all the resources, I think, and was starting to kind of come into that and learned about that.
And so what was it like opening that Big Buck?
Well, interestingly enough, Eric Brigham was working with Scott at the time too. We were putting in place together, and they had Gaylord, and they had the 28th Street location here in Grand Rapids, and we're starting up Auburn Hills, and they had a brewer named Tim Cabell, I think, or Cabell was his name, who was departing Big Buck, and that opportunity popped up. So while I was working a little bit with Scott and Eric on Auburn Hills, the Grand Rapids opportunity popped up really early on, and I raised my hand for that. And they gave me the job here in Grand Rapids. So we had a little JV Northwest system on 28th Street here in Grand Rapids, and that was awesome. Scott Graham was my mentor still, of course, and taught me a lot, but he gave me a lot of license, which was really fun. We had this little brew house, the smallest of the Big Buck group. So he had asked me to kind of develop some of these recipes a little bit more. The recipes were fairly basic. They were great beers. Big Buck beer is still one of my favorite. It's a brilliant beer. I mean, it's a hoppy pale ale with Chinook, Cluster, and Cascade. And I want to say it was 10% corn. Brilliant. It's awesome beer. And then, of course, we had this Buck Naked Light beer, which was, a 3.5% light beer with some Czech Saaz hops. Beautiful beer. I didn't realize at the time the kind of beers we were making. They were a good balance between, a macro, say, and the new craft styles. Now I think those beers would be even more popular. We're starting to see some changes now. But he had given me an opportunity to develop the recipes we had, and I got to brew every week, and we were really busy, and it was a lot of fun. That was I worked there for 1 year at that location, working for Scott, and I want to say I made about 800 barrels there. And I want to say we sold about 1,000 barrels. So it was pretty busy, It was a lot of fun. It was good gear. I did all double batches. And it was a real early on in my career where I actually added water to a bright beer tank. So that's like verboten, right? But yeah, my second craft brewing job was, 2/3 beer and 1/3 water in a BBT.
Interesting.
And that was just what we did. I didn't have anything positive or negative to say about it. It was our number one selling beer, so it was interesting, So later on, you talk about deer to water, you talk about where the water goes in the batch of beer.
Yeah.
It can go in anywhere, including the BBT.
Yeah.
But it was great, and of course we had great water here too in Grand Rapids.
So what was your sense of? So I'm struck by the fact that I hadn't really thought about this in the during those years, but as a Big Buck crew, you guys had a community within a community because you were brewing on your own in terms of you were given license to run Grand Rapids, and I'm sure Briggerman had license to run Auburn Hills, and Graham, and what was his other brewer up in Gaylord?
Went through a couple of them.
Well, anyways, so you had these individual brewers, but you guys could talk amongst yourselves.
And we did.
And had some resources.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we find everybody talking about in terms of as the brewing community grew, that being able to talk amongst other brewers and have this community versus being solos. And most other breweries didn't have multiple locations. Even if they had multiple brewers, they were all in the same system and doing the same thing. So I don't exactly know where the question is there, other than that, what was your sense of community like, both amongst the three operations within you, and then were you starting to network around and relate to breweries around the state?
Yes. Interestingly enough, New Holland, Jason and Brett, I don't even know how I came to know them. Met them, and we were trading phone calls, weekly, and yeast and hops, and it was a very congenial group. And that was kind of like the very beginning, of course, of the Brewers Guild, where we kind of got together. And I think the important thing is the resources, right, to your point.
Yeah.
I went from having very few resources. There's literature, and I immersed myself in literature. But then having Eric to call, and having Scott Graham, of course, to call. And we had Howard McMurray starting. And then, of course, we had Marty Rapnicki. And then, of course, Bill Wamby. All these men were excellent brewers, and I could call them with a question. And they would call me with questions, and we really, I think, learned, or I did at least, learn more from my peers than I did from the books that I was reading. And of course, experience is your best educator.
Yeah, yeah.
And funny enough, I met Jeremy Kosmicki at Big Buck.
Really?
Yeah, funny story. So there's a band, he's in a band called Oracle, and the local legends here in Grand Rapids. And at Big Buck, we had a Christmas party, and they had Oracle play at this Christmas party. And we had this bartender named Cayenne, and she was friends with the Oracle crew, and I hung out with her every day. She was an employee there, and we became friends. And this is in 97, 98. So I've known Jeremy, my colleague here at Founders for 20 years now. It's fascinating.
That's wild.
Yeah,
and it came through a music door, or
versus right. And I think I met Rick Dellinger and Steve Bushka at the same time. We had a Brewers, I can't remember what we called it, Brewers Happy Hour. And Scott promoted that. And so we had a Brewers Happy Hour at Founders, and I invited everybody, in the community over, and we had a great showing, and the Bells guys came up, and it was really fun. It was a great time. And again, we were really, really supportive of each other in general, I think.
So what was your first awareness, or what's your first story around the Michigan Brewers Guild as it came to exist? Because this is sort of the camaraderie and some of the examples of the early relationships in the community. What was your first story about the Guild?
Well, I think it's kind of funny because I've been doing this now and know a lot of people in the industry, but at one point in time, I didn't know anybody really. Scott Graham was great, and we were involved in that first Brewers Guild meeting, and I remember I fanboyed out on Larry a little bit. So
much to his delight,
I'm sure, but I walked right up to him. I'm not shy, me. I walked right up to him in the Hamilton Street pub there at that very first meeting.
Alec Mull.
Glad to meet you. Nice to meet you, Larry Bell. I think I probably said something like, "You're my hero" or something. But I was fascinated
just
to be.
We hadn't met yet.
I didn't know Fred Beltman yet at that point. But it was, a time where I was, like I said, I'm not shy. I'll walk right up to you and start chatting you. And it was a great opportunity. And Scott really wanted us to be involved, right? We were active. We wanted to be active in this community. And I'm sure he spearheaded a lot of this stuff, but he basically gave me the opportunity to participate. And it was great. I volunteered right away. I was on the Guild for a little bit, right? On the board. Yeah. I was Vice President Brewers, I think was what it was called at the time.
Great.
Yeah.
What did you take away from that first meeting? I mean, I can hear your enthusiasm for it, and let me back up. Let me just ask about what you were just saying. I want to expand a little bit. Like, what in you as a human being, in your upbringing, in your ethos, made you raise your hand and say, "I want to be a part of that" before you even knew what the hell it was?
That's a good question. I think it's my personality a little bit. I get excited by things like that. I like to be active. So I think that, I wanted to be a part of the community. I wanted to help contribute to the community. And I think it was just, honestly, just want to be involved. It was fun. This industry that we're in, can you think of more fun industries? Yeah. Can you believe that? Yeah. I mean, it's been 20 plus years since we've been doing this, but, and time flies, of course, but I get to wake up every day and make beer with my best friends, right? And that started back then.
Yeah. And so you, prior to having those 20 years of hindsight, you had a sense of what's great about what your career was beginning to be. I feel like, I'm paraphrasing, but I feel like you already recognized how lucky you were to be doing something that
Absolutely.
you enjoyed that much.
Yes, sir.
And did you feel that joining is a way to champion that and have it continue to exist more than not joining? Is that fair?
I just got goosebumps. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, you're involved too, right?
Yeah.
And I think champion is the right word. You know, I'm a Michigander. I love my state. I love my local community. I love making beer. I like the people I'm making with. And, you know, I remember just the first festivals, right? How exciting those were.
Oh, yeah.
We did how much work those were.
Terrifying sort of way.
Right. Oh yeah, totally, right.
I mean, but aren't the best like novels, movies, stories, the ones you lean into and wonder whether anybody's going to fucking survive? I mean, if it was easy, how interesting would it? These stories wouldn't mean anything.
Well, I think you appreciate it more when you work hard. It was hard work, but I think that I really enjoyed the hard work. I think when I look back and the things that I like the most about my career and the people that I've worked with, I bonded the most with people that we worked the hardest with.
Oh yeah.
And I look
That's why
back,
you came in talking about the Bell's days where we shared a shitty, leaky attic as an office, and we hardly knew if the company was going to survive. And like we look back at those times, like hell yeah, and we did.
It was so much fun, and I bonded with you and our colleagues there, and I still talk to these people every day. I Mike Omar, I see him on a regular basis.
Oh yeah.
Yep, and chat with Rick and. Who's my cousin, of course, you know that, but he's that whole group of people that we worked so hard together, and we really, you know, those are different times, right? Automation that didn't exist in our small segment of the industry, and you did it by yourself, by your hand, and with your teammates, and you bust your ass.
Yeah,
I secretly liked. Okay, I don't know about this, but I never wanted things to go wrong. But when things went wrong, I really enjoyed solving the problem.
Oh hell yeah,
I loved it. It's like, hey, this pump took a crap. I got to move this batch of beer over here. It's like, okay, let's do this.
I have a whole philosophy sort of rant on the idea of fighting out of the corner. You know, that there's something we love about fighting our way out of the corner, and the only way you get there is if you're there. Right. And there's times where we don't necessarily root for things to go wrong, but I do think manufacturing challenges for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Or keeping certain challenges in place versus solving them so well that you're no longer energized. I think there's a real art to that, and it's in craftsmanship. It's like, well, certain things we still want to, activate our senses, and we still want to smell and taste and touch and feel as part of our process. I think it's in a way related to that, like, hey, you know. This is still a human process.
The artisanship part of that.
Yeah.
Right? So we work in bigger breweries now, and you know, founders and us other brewers have some increased level of automation, and I try to find a balance. I still like the manual component. It keeps you engaged in it, and I think that, you know, I even commented this morning how much I like work and drinking my first runnings. Yeah. And I'll just, you know, go back in every brewery I've worked at where I'll take a sample of those first runnings and drink it in a coffee cup. And just that experience, that interaction with those, it gets a little bit lost with full automated plants. And we try to find a balance between automation and still manual so that we have that engagement, because I want our people to have some experience and then some ownership and feel confident that they're contributing positively to that.
It's also what will give them the skills to fight out of a corner should they find themselves in it.
I don't know. I just click this button and not happen.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
Right. Well, why?
What should we do? I don't know. Call somebody.
Right.
You know, there's different.
We got great, real smarter people than me on our team now to help solve those problems. But you know, I just really enjoyed solving problems, and I feel like I went to college to learn how to solve problems. What did I get from college? I got a little bit of confidence, and of course, I'm eager to jump on those solutions. So it's fun.
So going back to that first meeting that you went to. And you're going in with a lot of enthusiasm and your own sort of, I'm ready, put me in, let's do this. Yep. Do you remember walking away with, what did you have in the this is great bag of like, we've got the ingredients for a great community, and what did you walk away with maybe first with, where did you see challenges or concerns or worries about, I don't know, Do you remember any of those assessments from the first meeting?
Not the first meetings, because I hadn't seen any discord yet.
Yeah.
It was all like rah, 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 really want to promote our industry. And we hadn't really gone through the differences of personalities yet. Yeah. Those manifested themselves later. And I feel like the challenges never really stem from us as a group of, we all have the same goals, I think, in general. But we have smaller goals that sometimes conflicted with each other, and that started to come out. We have some big personalities, let's face it. You know, people in the brewing industry are like you and I, and again, Larry Bell and Tim Surprise and Peter Paisley, and some names like that you know, that you can hear them talk when you say their names, and sometimes we didn't always agree. So I felt the challenges that we had at a group were really just kind of all get on the same page, and then coming back to that same, like, hey, just supporting Michigan beer. Yeah.
And did you learn, I guess, what did you take away from some of those, you know, did we solve some of those? How did we go about solving some of those personality conflicts and or just challenges of different business models needing different things? And I said, I guess besides the solutions, did you take away, did we as an organization grow from those things? And what did we develop by getting through those times?
Wow, that's a good question, Fred. I think, I don't know if those are ever solved necessarily, because personalities are personalities. And I think as a group, we've come together, and we've got a much larger group too, which maybe makes you get strength in numbers, so to speak. And I think that's helped our group quite a bit. But yeah, I didn't think they were real significant impediments. I just thought they were kind of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to meetings and some people would get some heated arguments, and I was just a brewer, right? So it was a little bit different for me.
You could punch out when you needed to.
I could, right? And I got to like sit back and kind of watch some, you know, the fireworks, so to speak. And that was a good time. But I don't think it was really, to the outside world, I don't think they saw that, right? That was just us in the room chatting, and we had, again,
which I think was
passionate
important,
people.
and I think it was something that we fell into by deciding to be a community that got together. I think we stumbled into a couple of things that were really important. One of which is that we kept those disagreements in the engine room instead of in our public space.
Agreed.
Which I think does not invite people to your segment of business if they think there's discord.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
it was healthy discord too,
yeah,
right?
I think we created space to have those industry debates in a productive place. To let it all out. Speak your mind. The door's closed. Go for it. I think that was really healthy for a community, and I can't say that we pragmatically said, let's do this, but I think it was huge.
Well, we get
because
together
we had
annually.
there were some major you know, like big picture arguments that had to get worked out. And if they were worked out in sound bites and newspaper clips, or if they were worked out on the backs of our customers, I think we would have suffered some sort of result of at least slower pace or different.
But we didn't let that out.
Opinion.
Right. It was. I think we all.
Nor did we bottle it up. We didn't say don't have that opinion.
No, that was fun.
We don't speak up. I just kind of wandering around this, but I do think holding space for that and letting it happen was hugely important to building our unity.
Well, it was a good time. I enjoyed I don't want to say I enjoyed the Discord, but I enjoyed the discourse. And like I said, I was in a different position. I wasn't an owner.
You're also a philosophy major. So
Let's
get down to it.
Yeah, let's
what
chat
are we
about
thinking?
it. And I had so many great experiences with so many different people too. You know, even while I was at Big Buck, I started to meet people, and I worked a little bit in the Sheldy group. I got to work with Ron Jeffries, another one of my mentors who really influenced me a lot. Even time before, I got to see and work for Larry Bell in the internal part. You and I worked together. All those experiences, made me who I was. And I don't ever look back on any of these meetings that we had, even when there were some fireworks, and felt like that was a bad thing for our group. I always kind of felt like, oh, it's good. Let's talk about it like men and say what we got to say, and let's go have a beer afterwards. Yeah. And I always felt that's the way it was.
Yeah. That's good. You also championed quality and continue to, but you championed it with a business about draft quality.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, did a lot of good in terms of helping people be aware of
awareness
of how important the last step to pouring a beer is.
Yeah. what a great experience that was. In hindsight, sorry about that. That's my wife too. That's a Ween song, yeah. But nonetheless, I took a path. I loved working at Bell's, and it was a great experience. I just had my third child, and I kind of had to step back and challenge myself to see, what was the next step for me and my family. And I saw this huge need, right? This huge, and you said it before, and I echoed you, is the awareness. Right? We don't really know as brewers, and you get a beer back or whatever, you evaluate a beer, and you're like, that beer left perfect from this brewery, and it came back, and it's like this. And it kind of, again, the epiphany word works here. I had this epiphany that these draft beer systems were a problem. And there was an opportunity and a need to address the quality for draft beer dispense. And I don't think I solved anything, that's for sure, because it's a big issue. It still is, of course. I think there's a lot more resources out there. I'm really, really glad I did it. And hopefully I influenced people. And had a positive contribution on that. I know I'd give lectures on it pretty regularly, how to clean them. I still do at Michigan State as well, as a matter of fact. So I think the whole quality component, the beer, the experience our customers have with our beer. Every single beer our customer has is an experience. Yeah. And we need to make sure that's positive.
Yeah.
And sometimes it isn't.
Well, and I think that the draft quality is also a great example of talk about another metaphor that may reach a brewer versus a business owner, because we might be talking about regulation or promotion or these barriers to our business growing. But you talk about something that every brewer is going to, certainly anybody making draft beer, whether it's their faucets or somebody else's faucets, your beer's going through a faucet to get to a glass. And so you talk about an area where we could all work together on making sure that however our beer left our breweries is being poured. I'm just saying that's a point of joining together, because if the restaurant's taps are inadequate, they're inadequate for every beer going through them.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, it was a bigger issue. As I got more and more into it, I realized it was a bigger issue than I had originally thought. I mean, I've physically scrubbed, tens of thousands of faucets. And you start to see that the industry, at least my little microcosm here in mid-Michigan area, at least, I can't speak for other areas, but we have a need for increased attention. And maybe, the guild chatted about, how do we get involved in this? How do we certify, please? How do we teach people how to serve beer appropriately? Because you're right, it wasn't just bad for one brewery, it's bad for all of them.
Right.
One of the nice things about the state of Michigan is we don't, we don't allow distribution network to manipulate, clean, provide all that stuff for draft beer dispense. And I felt that was good, because the people out there adequately trained can support all brewers equally. Okay. Yeah. So if you have a wholesaler can clean your draft line, they're going to come up to whatever bar you're in and they're going to clean your line, and that's it. But systematically, the draft system still might not be adequately addressed, and you have fundamental issues like beer gas, for example. That's a big issue. Air compressors. I found air compressors all over the place.
Oh my goodness.
They existed.
Terrible.
I thought it was just a fairy tale.
And it was modern times.
Modern times.
We already know what's wrong, and we have organizations selling it to new restaurants. We're saying, give me the Cadillac.
And
they're coming in with absolutely incorrect science that they spent twice for.
And people thought I was a snake oil salesman when I'm trying to tell them that they couldn't use compressed air.
I was right with you.
It blew my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, there they were. I thought you'd heard about it, and you go in and like, oh my goodness, there it is, an air compressor.
No wonder. Were you around when Gary Nicholas went to answer this troubling draft problem in Kalamazoo, and he found argon hooked up?
Argon?
Yeah. Hooked up to a draft system.
Well, the fitting works the same, by the way. It's the same as the nitrogen fitting. So you can accidentally put it in an argon cylinder.
Yeah. How that even ends up on a system, and it's like, your keg's bad. Like, I'm pretty sure the welding gas might be part of the problem.
Yeah, people just don't know. So back to the awareness thing, I think bars and restaurants, they've got a lot of things to worry about, and draft beer dispense is a complicated science. It was a challenge. It was a big challenge. I think the restaurant industry in general doesn't give us enough respect to the draft beer system or the people that were taking care of them. And they didn't treat us like HVAC people or electricians or somebody like that.
Yeah.
So that was a challenge. It was really hard.
Well, and I feel like it's a place to, I feel like one of the things I'm taking away from, this story and remembering you beginning and continuing on that advocacy is that, there's so many areas where our strength as a group will make change. We'll make change in the quality of beer at breweries because we educated each other. It'll make change the quality of dispense because we made it an issue and that they heard it from more than one brewery. And they heard it from their customers who we educated. And then you go into that other stuff, the regulatory, the marketing, like there's so many different areas that where our voice as a group will make more positive change than our voices.
No question about it, strength in numbers. And, interestingly enough, Fred, I learned more about draft beer dispense from you than anybody else when I first started.
Wow.
You had that draft beer manual that you made at Bell's.
Yeah.
Dude, that was my Bible for a while,
Awesome.
man. I still have it, right? I have all my stuff. And I look back at you were way ahead of anybody else in our segment industry. You had vision and saw how important that was and broke down the science in this manual. This think about it, the manual was really in depth.
Temperature and pressure, baby.
But you went on. It was a 15-page manual or something like that, 10-page manual. Right. And when you hand that to a bartender, the chances of them reading it are, as you know now, slim to none. But I read it over and over and over again and understood it. And of course, we had John Mallett at the time too. I learned a lot from John. And what a great experience. And I didn't realize how little I knew about it until I really got out in the marketplace. And
in fact, I met him at the draft technical skills workship I took at Seaway.
Really?
And he was like auditing it to help them understand how the class should go or whatever. But I don't know shit. There's a bunch of people in this week-long class. And so I meet him, and then we're going through the material. They have a bunch of Xeroxed articles. And then I was flipping through an article. I'm like, wait, John Mallett, you said your name is John. Like, you wrote the article in our, like, what are you doing sitting in the student chair? You were reading your article.
He wrote the book on
a big influence
draft beer dispense, glass quality, how to get your kegs back. You can go on and on. He's amazing.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot from you, and it was a really great experience. Again, I wouldn't change it for the world. Would I do it again is a better question.
So I guess wrapping up, what's the invitation to a new a person that is coming into the industry in some way, or a brewery that's getting started in some way? If you had words of advice on either, brewing community in general, and or how can they get the most out of joining a community and joining the Brewers Guild, what would your words of advice be?
Ask questions. You have the most amazing community here in the state of Michigan with the most amazing brewers in this whole state at your fingertips, and they love talking about beer.
Yep.
I think I think people would probably get a little too proud. Hey, I got this new brewery. I've been, running this brewery for a year. I know what I'm doing. You know what? There's so many people out there that can help you with anything and want to help you. And I think that community that you join, you just talk about, when you go to the annual conference, for example, the winter conference, that is the most tremendous opportunity for you as a new brewer to go and of course, learn from all of your peers in the industry. And we bring in, of course, technical experts so you can learn from them. And it's the having the beers between classes are even twice as valuable as the class themselves. So I think my advice to any new brewer is to go to the winter conference and talk and listen to as many people as you can.
Yeah.
That's the best. Again, I'm just a brewer side. I'm not an owner. And I look at I enjoy the manufacturing, the production, the brewing side of it. And the resources that we have available for you there are second to none.
I agree. I also think that this whole conversation has made me think of something that, knowledge and expertise learned through relationship is something different than anything else, because I was moved by you sharing that I had influenced you in some way with a thing that was adjacent to my bigger picture, which was the draft skills, but it was very crucial to what we were dealing with at the time. I was moved by that, and you remembered it, and you could tell me what the book looked like, and immediately moved to think about, well, who inspired me with that? Like, when there's a relationship connected to your knowledge, it has a more everlasting, powerful, influential impact on you, and you pay it fucking forward.
I'm serious. Look at my goosebumps, dude. You just gave me goosebumps. I mean, just hanging out with you. I can't believe you're gonna kick me out here, man. You're like wrapping it up.
I am.
What, man? I know you gotta kick me out.
Well, we don't have to wrap it up immediately. We got 5 minutes.
Well, we don't talk very often, Fred.
Yeah. So let it rip, man. I'm not.
Well, yeah. What a great. Again, time flies, and it's hard to you approach every day, and every day is a challenge, a good challenge, of course. But it's remembering and the people that influence you. And I think what you just said about you learn from those people, and it's more impactful. It's more profound. profound. Like the things I learned from
things like the conference have, is that they can light a wick. That means you now know the person. They've talked with you. The call is going to be different than you calling out of the blue.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to start from either direction. Either you attended a seminar because you needed that information, they taught you something, and then that inspired you to go say hi to them. Or you say hi to them over a beer, and then you realize, I know what they're the person I think of when I call for help.
I'll call them up.
It doesn't matter what direction it comes from, but the conference, and more than any of our other events,
no question about it.
I think the conference puts those things in place and it allows both of those to start, which is hugely impactful on helping everybody be better at what they do.
Making better
and helping those people make the next round of people better at what they do.
Yeah, let's face it, our time here is short.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can create a legacy in our community. I think we are and have done that in large part. Now we have a new generation of brewers. I mean, the GABF, we were lucky enough to get a medal, but I read the GABF now and I hardly recognize any of these brewers anymore. There's a whole new wave.
Well, there's 9,000 fucking beers.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's amazing. And there's a new wave of brewers out there that are probably don't have the experiences yet. And I think we are obligated in some way to help shed our experiences and knowledges on them. Tell you what you said is it's more impactful.
Well, and I don't think it's certainly neither of us, and I think most of the people we know in these circles, none of us would be gratified with only singular advancement. If we were just saying, well, I got better, and then I got better again, and then I was the only one that had gotten better. That feels totally hollow to me. I feel like our gratitude is from this broader connectivity of I got better, but I got better while other people were getting better, and because of other people helping me and me helping them, and I also, I feel proud when other people are developing, and if I
the rising tides,
I help that, I'm grateful for it, and I know that none of my advancements were done alone. They were all done because people helped me.
Right. It takes a village. You can say a number of cliches, and the rising tides one floats all boats, of course.
All that stuff. And I feel that's one of the reasons we have a rich experience and smile when we tell these stories is we were never alone with it.
Oh, I love reminiscing.
Yeah. And there are businesses where I think you good luck. You're out there alone. And we're going to try to kill you while you do it.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, fuck that.
I want to make beer with my friends. Even my friends that are fierce competitors on the shelf. I still can't wait to see them and talk to them. And that's my favorite part about going to the conferences, for example, is just seeing all my homies. It's been a long time, and everyone means a lot to me.
Yeah, me too, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing, and really for making this community what it is.
You, all of us, right?
All of us.
It's been. I'm just one little contributor in this group, and we're really lucky people. Yeah. Really lucky. That's the thing that I take away most from my experience in the brewing industry is how lucky I am.
Yeah, right on, brother.
All right, love you, Fred.
Now I'm kicking you.
Now you're kicking me out. Turn this thing off.
Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.
Let's drink